Yeah, and this kind of brings me back to January 6th and how conservatives have reacted to it, because the way that the liberal media has reacted to it is exactly what you'd expect. I mean, it's a slam dunk. Obviously, you just Trump's bad, Trump supporters are bad, look what they've done, and you show the clips over and over. And the reality is it's terrible. I mean, the party of Back the Blue, like dragging cops through a crowd and hitting them with blunt objects and beating them with flags and bear spraying them. It's a terrible thing. And obviously, I would expect the liberal media to capitalize on that, because what the hell are they doing if they don't capitalize on that? I mean, that's like the easiest to score points that have ever existed in modern political media. What's been very interesting to me is how the conservative commentariat has reacted to January 6th. And I think it speaks to a lot of the same bifurcation in desires within the conservative movement right now. To one, you don't want to step on Trump's toes and have him nuke you, as you don't want to get Liz Cheney. You don't want to be the next person to do that. You've seen a lot of the members of Congress who voted to certify the election results when Trump put the screws to him have basically bowed to him, even though on that instance they weren't for him. You've seen the ones that have not done that have Trump show up to their district and campaign for primary opponents. So on the one hand, there's the desire to not speak out about January 6th because that's going to get Trump to come after you. But on the other hand, there's conservative speakers, whatever, commentariat folks who really downplay the significance of the day in my mind, and how much it was a disenfranchised American people, a group of these people, very large group. Some of this was clearly planned by groups like the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, weeks in advance, but hundreds of those people were just people who were along for the ride, who feel disenfranchised. And the fact of the matter is that 60% of the US people, and this is being generous, don't approve of the job that Congress is doing. And to me, the conservative response, if there was some nuance, would be the actions of January 6th were absolutely horrible. We completely denounce them. This must never happen again. However, this happened because there are tens of millions of people within this country that feel completely disenfranchised by the political system, and we're here to speak for them. Instead, the response seems to have been, January 6th, you call it a deadly insurrection. The only person who died was Ashley Babbitt. January 6th, you say it was an insurrection. Well, they didn't actually technically take over the functions of government, so it wasn't really an insurrection. It's like, don't downplay that event. Don't downplay the seriousness of it just because it makes you look bad. Accept the heat, because you're going to take the heat either way, and then say, now let's talk about why the hell this happened, because that did not happen by accident.
Mm-hmm. So this is probably the most complicated political situation in recent American history, at least in my memory.
Certainly.
And part of the problem is that we get no airtime, even in conservative media, about what really happened on that day. We're still waiting on 14,000 hours of security footage from inside the building, which is absolutely absurd. And some of the district court judges are starting to really get on the DOJ about that, because they're holding people in solitary confinement still on charges that would not get solitary confinement as a punishment if they are found guilty of them, but to hold them in solitary confinement in pre-trial for unlawful picketing on government property, parading, interrupting a government hearing, is absurd. Like, I cannot possibly overstate how wrong and absurd it is that people are being held in solitary confinement on the charge of allegedly picketing unlawfully on government property. Like, that is, without exaggeration, on par with how it would go if you were in the gulags in Soviet Russia, because that's how you'd be treated. They would find some little charge of a political dissident, and they would just throw them in prison and leave them there. Obviously, what happened on January 6th was wrong. But what we're starting to find out more and more is that the narrative that we have been fed is complete BS. Obviously, there have been no weapons recovered. The reason the Capitol was evacuated was not because of anything to do with the quote unquote insurrection or riot or protest or whatever adjective you want to use. It was because of the bomb that was located at 1251 at the RNC, and the chief of the former chief of police for the Capitol, I can't remember his exact title, just testified to this to a joint session of the Senate. And it was very clear, it was explicitly clear that that's why it was evacuated. It had nothing to do with the events of, the January 6th protest. We've seen the videos coming out from inside where people are kind of like walking through and they're confused. You got people, taking pictures, staying within the corded ropes. There's a video that came out whenever somebody was trying to get up into Vice President Pence's chair, and another one is yelling at him where he's like, "You've got to be respectful. You've got to that's not ours. You've got to get off it." It was a very weird situation from the videos that I've seen, from, all of the accounts that I've heard. It is definitely a weird situation.
It's so weird because in one part of the building, you'll have the old lady walking around looking like she doesn't know where her dentures are. And then in the other part of the building, you'll have like a line of Oath Keepers systematically like beating the shit out of cops. And this is happening at the exact same time, 250 yards away in space. But they could be in different worlds, how different it is on the footage. And so depending on which news network you're watching, you're going to have completely different opinions of that day.
Right. So the first person who was actually sentenced over the January 6th was a hair salon owner. I think it was in late June, and she was convicted, quote unquote, of misdemeanor charges of parading, demonstrating, and picketing on government property. Okay, if that's what we're charging people with, if that's the convictions we're getting, if that's the scalps we're getting, then it is so disingenuous to keep calling it an insurrection. And that's really where I've started to realize that what we think we might know about this day might turn out to be 100% false. And I say that with complete, I actually believe that, because at first I was like, holy crap, there's a bunch of people up there. They're, it's starting to get violent. It's starting to get pushy. I'm just like kind of watching this.
There,
Yeah, I was watching it from a distance. I'm like, okay, this kind of looks like a tense situation, right? Okay. And then, on the way back to the hotel, I was watching people get tear gas, and then people coming, back out and pouring milk in their eyes. And I was like, okay, we're just going to leave because there's no reason to be here. It was kind of dumb. So on the way back, we started hearing rumors somebody was shot. The Capitol Police shot somebody inside. Obviously, that would turn out to be Ashley Babbitt later. Didn't know anything at the time, but it didn't feel, when I was there, that anybody was there trying to take over the government. Nobody was talking about it. I didn't hear anything about it. It was clearly not the intent of the crowd. The crowd was there to try and, make their voices heard because they felt like they weren't being heard. And they felt like they were being obfuscated and misconstrued by the press and by the media and by politicians alike. So, and then as you've seen in the 6 months since, how it's been covered, and the routine, it's been routinely debunked. The idea that it's been an insurrection. Oh, it was a violent insurrection. Well, there were no weapons recovered. Oh, well, it was a deadly insurrection. Okay, well, the only person who was killed by a police officer who shot a veteran who was unarmed and was climbing through a window. And we still don't know who shot her. Well, when we do, is Michael Byrd, but that hasn't been confirmed. And then, AOC comes out and she's saying, oh, well, we were being chased. We had to be evacuated, all of these things. But it turns out the reason she was evacuated wasn't because of the protests. It was because they found a bomb at the RNC. And interestingly enough, basically the only people they haven't caught from January 6th are the people who placed the pipe bombs. They've got the guy who bought a Lego set. They've got the guy who was there taking pictures of the roof. They've got everybody except the guys who actually caused the problem, the guys who actually are responsible for the evacuation of the building, the guys who actually brought a deadly weapon to the premises. They've got all of these political prisoners that, there's over 540 of them now, that they're charging with misdemeanor crimes, calling it an insurrection, and the FBI is completely incompetent whenever it comes to finding the people who actually brought bombs to DC that day. The truth is, I don't really buy the narrative because I think they've shot their credibility to hell. So I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt because I don't think that they have earned it anymore. I think that they have been proven to have lied about this day and the events of this day enough where for me to continue to give them the benefit of the doubt whenever they still won't release over 14,000 hours of footage, whenever they are still trying to, issue gag orders on the defendants and all of these things to try and keep information from the public, I don't see why that should promote trust with the narrative that you are trying to sell me. Obviously doesn't mean I think that what happened on January 6th was smart, that it was right or anything like that, because I definitely don't. But I think that the events of January 6th pale in comparison to the wrongs that the federal government has committed and is currently committing against the people who were there that day. And I think that's pretty much undeniable.
Yeah, I think my interpretation of that day varies significantly from yours. One thing that has been really good, and I know you're probably not going to believe this one, but the New York Times actually did a great visual investigations. Like, they do their visual investigations team stitched together like probably a couple hundred videos into like this 45-minute documentary that was really helped me understand what was actually happening, because they had the 3D map of the Capitol complex, but they also had stitched together so many videos that you felt like you were the first person in the crowd almost throughout the whole of all of the different breaches, which I believe there were 5 or 6 ways that people were getting into the building. So you always felt like you were like the guy leading the charge, just because, so many people were shooting videos on their phone that day that even without a single second of video from the CCTV in the Capitol facility, you can get a very good idea as to what was happening. And like I was talking about earlier, it's absolutely bizarre to watch. Like the little door underneath the semicircle, kind of like where the president comes out in the inauguration. I'm not sure what the formal title of that door is, but it was absolute mayhem over there. Whereas there was one of the doors where you walk around the back side of the building where the cops were like taking video with the people walking in. Mm-hmm. That being said, I don't know. I still see like there were parts of that were absolutely brutally violent. Like there's that one video of the cop who's like jammed up in a door that's being shut on him, just like the guy's screaming in pain. It's inhumanly violent. Like, it's terrible. You would never do that to another person. It's just like one of the madness of crowds kinds of things. And I think to deny that stuff is serious or say that it's being overblown or that the people that are doing that are being wrongfully held, it's like, if you want to play that game, you're going to face some serious consequences. And I was sitting there watching the TV on January 6th and saying, holy shit, these people are all going to jail for a long time. And I mean, you got to go through person by person and say, what did this person do? Which door did they come through? Who did they knock over? Are you a person who bear sprayed somebody to get in here? Or did you just kind of wander in like that old lady who looked like she didn't know what her middle name is anymore?
Right.
And
she looks like Joe Biden.
Right. Just like Joe Biden. You got to treat all these people appropriately, but saying that it's some sort of false narrative that this was like, at least on some levels, a very gruesomely violent day. I don't think that they came prepared to overthrow the government, because there's no evidence that they came prepared to overthrow the government, as you point out. No weapons recovered. There were some baseball bats, some bear spray. People did come wearing helmets, especially the Oath Keepers crowd. That New York Times piece does a very good job of pointing out the Oath Keeper guys, because it follows them through the crowd, and you see like they all got their hands on each other's shoulders, and they're all wearing the same, military style Kevlar and helmets. And so you think that they might have had some serious intentions. However, then you see the hundreds of other people who are just, there and or not like you, who was smart enough to say some shit's going down, I better get out of here. Just people who were, 20% too dumb to realize what they were walking into. So it's a very complicated day, but I don't see the benefit in trying to walk back the violence of that day.
No, I'm not at all. Like, if you're, beating somebody over the head with a chair, yeah, no, you should definitely be brought up on assault charges. But the fact that there were maybe 3, 4, 5 instances of really bad, clear assaults that I've seen. I mean, there's a lot of videos that I've seen that are like really confusing as to, you watch it and you're like, I don't know what is happening. Yeah, right. But you've got a couple of videos out there where you've got one person or maybe two people that are like actually just like clear on, okay, you're just committing assault. Like, that's just violent assault. Okay, that's what that is. Yeah, no, the 100% they should be charged. But to say that, oh, well, there was a couple of these events spread throughout the Capitol on this day among a crowd of like-minded political, politically similar people, and then we can then kind of imbue that motive or desire for violence or insurrection or whatever to everybody is kind of absurd. And let me put it this way: it is way less than 7% of the people that showed up on January 7th committed assault that day. However, if you look back to all of last year, we were told that 93% of BLM protests were nonviolent, right? And it's well below that number for January 6th. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't be charged for crimes whenever they committed crimes. I'm just saying that you shouldn't be held in solitary confinement for picketing unlawfully on government property, or picketing without a permit, or parading on government property, or interrupting a government hearing. I'm saying that the large majority of people overwhelming majority of people did not go to DC that day, or even to the Capitol, those that went to the Capitol that day, to commit any crimes, to do anything wrong, and the vast majority of them didn't. And if we had any honesty in the media, we had any honesty in DC, then we would not be blowing this out of proportion. We would treat each person as an individual who went in there. And this is kind of a symptom of, intersectionalism and group identity, where people get judged based on the demographic or their political affiliation or their race or whatever, right? It's kind of just an extension of this group political affiliation that has kind of taken over America recently. If somebody committed a crime that day, they should definitely be charged, but they should be charged appropriately, and that has not been done. And the state has committed way worse violations of civil rights and human rights since January 6th than all of the offenses on January 6th combined. And I think that's pretty clear.
So you just spoke of how the majority of the people who entered the Capitol building on January 6th had no intention of violence and didn't commit any violence when they were there. And I think that in doing so, you kind of spoke to the ability of a very small percentage of people who are capable and willing to commit violence to pull a giant crowd with them into doing the same thing. I think that that's a huge threat to the stability of our democracy and to the republic, because if things continue to get as polarized as they've been in the last couple of years, all it takes is whatever those 2% of people who are willing to escalate things to have people who are too naive to know that they shouldn't be following them to follow them over the brink, and all of a sudden we could descend into an absolute lunacy. You know, obviously speaking vaguely here because of the world that we live in, but you can extrapolate the threats of that propensity that all human beings seem to have to follow the leader in situations like that.